Well, the advantage of that term was that nobody knew what it meant. So they had to start listening to an explanation. And sure enough, that laid to rest an awful lot of these misinterpretations. And we don't really have to argue about that anymore. Some people thought it was too fancy a word, but the interesting thing is that the word valorization has since become also an almost mainstream word. You run into it everywhere now, whereas in 1983 hardly anybody had heard of it, which is why some normalization supporters actually weren't very happy about it. But now the word is everywhere, and is pretty readily understood. So anyway, that called for a rephrasing of the theory in social role terms, in terms of valued and devalued social roles, and a greater elaboration of role theory, even though role theory has always been at the core of normalization, but now a very much more systematic elaboration of it, and then a respelling out of implications, which we did with another evaluation instrument. And this was a big one. We call it passing. And this gave a much more detailed description of the theory of social role valorization, and then once again spelled out the specific implementive elements, like setting neighborhood harmony, your service setting, or program neighborhood harmony, and image projection of program to program juxtaposition. This tool broke down the issue of how people are imaged in more detail than anywhere else in the literature, and it broke down the various considerations you should take into account of what the physical setting should be like, and it had the most detailed elaboration of grouping issues. How should people be grouped, and why? Who should be grouped or not be grouped with somebody else, and how how to take into account age factor in grouping, or sex factor, or the degree of deviancy in grouping, and how many people in a group, and what kind, and so on. And we just revised that in 2007, a considerable improvement over the 1983 edition, and it's really the most detailed elaboration of social role valorization in print today. There is a small book that, actually the two books, there's a small book that gives a concise summary and overview of normalization, of social role valorization. And then one of our friends wrote a textbook in England, who he'd been through the training, and he essentially wrote up our training workshop into a textbook, which is also very, very, very good. And so those are, you might say, the core writings on SRV at this time.